Good afternoon. So this panel will be about the situation and the perspectives of the green bond market, and we have three exceptional speakers to cover this issue. The three companies that they represent have already issued green bonds, and in fact, TransLink announced today that that they plan to issue bonds in the coming days. So let me start with introducing the speakers. On the far right, from the location point of view, I have Julian Deschâtelets. He's the managing director at Brookfield Renewable Group. He joined the company back in 2011, and previously he was project finance manager at Sport Development Canada. In the center, I have Christine Dacre. She's a CFO at TransLink. She's a chartered professional accountant, and he has more than 15 years of experience, both at executive and financial positions. And next to me, I have Halina Hagen, who is a global treasurer at Manulife. She has more than 30 years of experience. Previously, she was at RBC. So, probably the first issue that I would like to ask, the first question is regarding, well, you have several tools, obviously, at your that you can use to complete your funding plans. You know, what is the role that the green bonds have, you know, within the wider funding programs that you run? Maybe, Julian.
Well, at Brookfield Renewable, obviously we're one of the largest pure-play renewable power companies globally. So we're naturally a green bond issuer, or green loan issuer. So to date, we've issued just over 900 million Canadian in corporate green bonds. As well, in the U.S. private placement space, we've issued 1.2 billion of project-level green bonds. So it plays a central role in our funding plans. We do it because it helps us. The main reason we do this is to broaden our investor base. We're a fast-growing company in a fast-growing sector, and so access to multiple sources of capital is important. We also do it as sort of a tool to a PR tool, but also justification, a third-party justification tool for our other investors, meaning our shareholders, as well as our private fund investors. And I would say, just to finish off, I guess the next phase for us is to launch into emerging market green bonds or green loans. We're doing quite a bit of work right now in Brazil and China on this front.
Christine?
Yeah. TransLink, we actually issued our inaugural green bond last year. We issued a $400 million green bond. We've been in the capital markets since 2010, and we've raised a total of just over $1.9 billion. And a lot of times we got asked, especially in the recent years, why aren't you issuing green bonds? Being a public transit organization, all of our projects similar are green. They're green in nature. So we just got asked that a lot. We waited for the right time, and then last year was our inaugural. As you mentioned, we've just announced that we're going to be issuing a $200 million green bond again this year, shortly. And in the future, we will probably have both. It won't all be green. We do have projects that wouldn't qualify for green, but it's definitely going to be a big part of our future investments.
When you say
issuance.
Big, means at least 1/3, more than 1/3?
We'll have to see what our expansion projects are. I mean, we have a significant number of future investments. We're going to be moving to low carbon fleet strategy. We already have a trolley network of buses, so we already are very green anyways, but we're moving our diesel buses to hybrid buses, and now we're looking to electric battery buses as well. So it just depends on how fast we can get there, our capital funding, and also senior government funding. And so when we can go green, we will be going green.
Halina? you issued last year.
Last year and the year before.
Oh,
so Manulife is a life insurance company, a global life insurance company with the income 5.5 billion or so a year, distributed almost one third between Canada, United States, where we operate as John Hancock, and Asia. And I am saying this because our funding program is aligned with our business. Being a life insurance companies, we've been looking for long-term assets and have on our balance sheet $13 billion in renewable energy, real estate that's environmentally friendly, as well as timberland. And hence, our investment strategy naturally aligns and motivated us to issue a green bond. So we were the first life insurance company to do so in 2017. We started with Singapore for funding reasons, where we issued 500 million in green bond. And then a year later, again, the second time by life insurance company, we issued 600 million in Canada. So right now, green bonds represent around 10% of our debt portfolio. Going forward, I have to say, like, we issued the first one, the second one, and I was really hoping that my peers will come and in support of this market. So we welcome the subsequent issuance by one of the Canadian peers and also a global insurance company, because for this market to be credible and sustainable, we need supply and demand to increase substantially. And why did we issue the green bond? Because similar to my colleagues here, we looked at it as a very good alignment between our corporate values, our business strategy, where as a life insurance companies, we are vested in well-being of a society longer term, and also investment strategy.
So you said that you have 30 billion of assets.
Yes, of green, undeniably green assets,
okay.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you have only two green bond issues. So
Yes.
I guess you have potential to
We have
increase
potential, yes,
significantly.
yes.
So should we expect Manulife to revisit the market in the coming 6 months? Or
we will, coming 6 months is a question I shall not answer. The strategy of the company in terms of funding this year was actually to reduce the leverage, and we are well advanced on our path there. But absolutely, Esteban, we do have callable and maturing instruments in the next year or so, and our business grows very healthily. So we will be looking into financing opportunities, and certainly looking then, to what extent it makes sense to do a green bond again.
The green bonds, for until, at least from my perspective, so I may be wrong, but until 6 or 9 months ago was something that was evolving and expanding and growing and so on. But in the last 6 weeks, we had seen a lot of young people, especially, demonstrating in several cities in Canada and in other countries. And basically, if instead of this audience, we have college students listening to this conference, green bonds are the green bonds changing realities, or is making possible any change in a significant way, or is just basically a statement of values that companies can go to the market and say, yes, we are for green values, but nothing else apart from that?
Maybe I will start now, sure. The reverse order. So I believe the green bonds are responding to realities, namely a growing awareness on the importance of climate protection, and especially I see this evolving due to the generational sensitivities. The millennia are much more sensitive and taking stance, as you indicated, and they are the investors of the future. So I think the societal values are changing, and they are putting pressure on commercial realities. In my view also, because one cannot get too cynical on the topic for the time being, because quite a few issuers, and I believe we would say the same, we don't issue the green bond for the sake of issuing a green bond. We issue it because it fits within our funding strategy and our investment strategy. But I still see a tremendous value in the growth of this market and the awareness, because it is this awareness and this change in commercial sensitivities that in the end will also bring very tangible changes to investor behavior.
Yeah, I also agree that we are making a difference, that climate change is real, and organizations are looking at what they can do to, as they expand and invest and they're making better decisions. Similarly, we're not issuing green bonds just to market them. We're not issuing just to say they're green. We're issuing green because we have projects that are green. And we have we place a lot of attention in making our decisions on what buses we're going to procure, how we're going to design future bus depots. And we're making those decisions because it's the right thing and because of climate change. So I believe it is making a difference.
I think green bonds are part of this. I think what we're saying is it's part of the solution. And I think there's a lot of momentum right now around, from governments to corporations to financial institutions, as well as issuers, to globally focus on decarbonization of the industry and of the world. Mm-hmm. And so I think as you're able to secure long-term funding from green bonds, then that will allow us to invest more in the decarbonization. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an important element. I think, in practical terms, that means the young folks, if they're really, if they find this important, they should be investing in green, on the equity side, green funds, mm-hmm. on the bond side. So, I think it is definitely part of the solution. And I think the other thing that's also becoming more important and important to the new generation is transparency and disclosure. So the ESG movement is also growing, and that's sort of an important part of all of our businesses. We're spending a lot of time thinking about what to disclose and what to share with the investors, be it young investors or bond investors. And so I think ESG is also an important theme, I think, for the younger generations and disclosure around how we manage our businesses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably the question is not whether you guys do all the requirements that a green bond demand. Obviously you do it, but it's more whether the assets that you are providing the financing are better financed via green bonds compared with the regular funding channels. So because I guess in the case of British Columbia's transport projects, British Columbia is a AAA province.
AA.
Yeah.
They're the provinces.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So in principle, you always will have a market so you don't need green bonds necessarily. In order to get a feasible financing.
Yeah,
for those
absolutely. We did very well issuing bonds when they weren't green. Mm-hmm. But I think to comments that were already made, if investors want green and we do have green projects, then it's up to us to issue a green bond to meet that need. Mm-hmm. We do have other bonds that we will have to issue that don't qualify for green. Mm-hmm. But we will, we are answering that demand as well.
In terms of the pricing, the green bonds versus the regular bonds, are you seeing already any advantage or not? Is
no,
pricing?
I mean, I think most people in the room understand it's at this point it's really been at par with the traditional sources of funding. And as I said, if you step back and look at Canada, and if we look at our bond issuances, I mean, we talk about a green bond, but the reality is it's a combination of traditional investors as well as green investors. And for example, our bonds, although we've issued, again, 2 of them, only 15% of the investors in those bonds are actually green-themed, have green-themed investment strategies. So the other 85% is actually traditional.
I would like to add to this because, again, pragmatically, this is still a very nascent market. I saw some statistics that year over year, only globally 2.1% of bonds were issued as green. And it's already, the market is rapidly evolving. So it's still a tiny segment of the market. Manulife has, of course, is also an investor on the other side of our balance sheet, and our colleagues would tell you what investors told us when we were issuing, that they don't have enough green mandate to give a price advantage or a benefit to an instrument that is green relative to regular instrument. So I think for this market to really make a tangible difference, there needs to be more demand for all of us here as investors jointly through our asset managers. And on the issuance side, we did not see a price advantage, and at the same time, arguably, you incur a bit higher costs because you need to ring-fence asset, have disclosures, you want to protect your reputation. So our green bond framework has been audited. The assets that we assigned the first time around to our proceeds were audited as well. So there are extra costs which we incurred to make this statement. However, when this market progresses and gets tighter, there is more standardization, there may be more legal liability, then the question of costs, because just as investors need to get the best return to their clients, we as issuers need to get the cheapest funding to our shareholders. So the question of costs will become a real question in which the governments and other authorities, I think, would have a role to play, because arguably it's a public good that may not be necessarily efficiently and appropriately priced just through the markets.
Regarding the standardization, I think was before the summer break, the government, or better, some experts hired by the government, put out 15 recommendations, which is, that was widely published and discussed. What would be the role of what that the government and the public sector should play in the design of the green bond as an asset class?
I can start. To my view, again, stepping back, this is a new market. It's growing. It's a fast-growing market, so it's not mature yet. I think government's role in this sector, an asset class, is more about creating liquidity and interest in the sector. It's about them issuing green bonds. It's about them being a bit novel in creating new products that are green or ESG themed. And sort of create liquidity for that market and interest from both our investment managers in Canada and abroad. When it comes to regulation, I think that there's enough sophisticated investors and other stakeholders in this space that can self-regulate the industry. Ultimately, if an issuer doesn't follow what he said he would and his bond doesn't respect sort of the green bond principles, then either his next issuance will be impacted by that, or his existing bonds will trade at a lower price, or a higher price. So my view is that government's really about liquidity and maintaining liquidity and interest in this space, in the green space, and not about sort of setting out frameworks. There's enough. CBI has a framework. Obviously, there's others. There's a lot of second-party opinion providers like Sustainalytics. You've got index providers like MSCI, you've got, Bloomberg in terms of index. So you've got all sorts of other stakeholders that will keep everyone in check.
one of the recommendations that were out in that document were some kind of tax incentives. One of them in the same way that the muni market. Wonder if you have a view on.
No, not. I was just going to comment
No.
on the,
Yeah.
you know, certainly from our perspective, having that second party opinion on our framework was very important. I think that adds to credibility. I have heard a lot of discussions about the reporting, you know, impact reporting, and do we need more regulation? I don't know if regulation, more standardized framework would probably be a better word than regulation. I also don't believe that the government needs to step in. I think the market will evolve just like it has in Europe. You know, the green bond market, you know, has been in Europe for a lot longer than Canada. We're just new to it. But I do think that maybe some standardized reporting would be a good thing. I have heard a lot of investors say that as well. We're just completing our first annual report on our issuance from last year. It's a lot of work.
Yes, it
so
is.
to your,
It is.
it's a lot
It
of
is.
work.
It is.
But it's good work.
Yeah.
It's necessary. We as an organization are very transparent. We do a lot of reporting out, and I think it's very necessary for it. But you know, deciding, you know, what level, how long should the report be, how much detail do you go into, I think we could have used a little bit of standardization.
I would fully agree with this, that standardization would help this market, because the key risk from an issuer perspective and likely investor perspective is this reputation risk. When we say it's really a green bond financing green assets, can anyone challenge it, and what the standards are to assign it as such. So, and the same for investors as well. So I believe the standardization would be helpful. On the other hand, if standardization becomes stringent regulation, then it increases these very reputational and legal risks and increases the costs and may deter the issuance.
Yeah.
So like there is a balance to be struck there. I also like, although Manulife has invested in renewable energy and timberland, etc., and linked the proceeds of our issuances to undeniably green assets. By the same token, in the economies like Canada that are so heavily resource-based, having transition bonds and taxonomy, I think, is also very important, because we want to move in this direction together as a society, talking about sustainability. We don't want to make communities unsustainable because of competing values here. So having more clarity on what this means, so that we don't have accusations of greenwashing, etc., for those who want to invest in more climate-friendly technologies, I think is also a good move forward.
We have 1 minute just to cover the oil and sands. What can be done with the bond issues out of the energy and oil companies in particular, in terms of stimulating the
Well, I think
the
as long
reduction.
as it truly improves the climate and how they produce, that's a step forward.
Right. I think we just got the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.